Hello there again, and I hope you're all having a great start to the weekend. Okay, today's topic is all about the jinn, meaning the genie, not gin the drink, but the genie, those ancient magical spirit beings from the ancient Arabic world. Now, there seems to be a rising interest in Arabic magic, originating well before the restrictive Islamic religion took hold of the region. And the Islamic religion attempted to purge natural magic out of its lands. But before this happened, there was a lot of magic going on. And today, we're going to travel and take a look at the mysterious beginnings of occult science in Arabia. We will take a quick but fascinating look at the powerful magical jinn, also known as the genie, and then dive deeper into the mysterious realm of magic. So let's dive in and take a closer look. So, genie or jinn. There are so many spellings. So probably the first thing you think of when hearing that, if you're in the West at least, would be of rubbing a lamp and then some gigantic blue humanoid spirit-like apparition emerging in a puff of mystical smoke that sounded something like Robin Williams on coke, right? But that is not at all what jinn are. The jinn we know in pop culture and pop art are not the jinn of ancient folklore or of various religious practices that predate Islam. Instead of this friendly, gregarious, quizzical character that for some reason is bound to a lamp, the world of jinn is fairly vast and a very varied one. And the jinn, just like human beings, have free will. They actually do. Therefore, naturally, some are good and some are not so good. Some are actually quite bad. Some are merely unpredictable or quirky as well. And we see regional variations too throughout relevant history in the way that jinn were treated by human beings at that time. If we examine the etymology of the word jinn, jinn would be the plural, and jinni or genie would be the singular. And also, it is important to note that the same root word is related to the idea of genius, which goes back to Greco-Roman times, but is not actually in reference to intellect at all. The belief in the existence of the jinn is very old, and as I mentioned before, it predates Islamic culture by several centuries at the very least. In ancient times, before people were forced to practice this Islamic religion, liberal pagan cultures in the region had already believed in the magical beings known as jinn or genie. These beliefs varied, and in some parts they didn't believe in them as being just another form of life created by God along with man and along with angels. They instead believed in jinn as tributary spirits. In some parts of the world, they were venerated like ancestors were venerated. In other parts, they were treated as demigods or nature spirits of some sort. And then still in other parts, they were vilified as demons. And yet still sometimes in other areas, they were even thought of and regarded as being guardians of a place similar to the benevolent fairies that we find in Western culture and folklore. So we know all this is true because there has been found sufficient archaeological evidence to support what I've just stated. One excellent example is in Palmyra in southern Arabia, where we hear of the anonymous guardian spirits of the local community and the ancestor spirits of the family. These were referred to as the son of their ancestors. In North Arabia, there were beings referred to as Genies, who are spoken of in an inscription from the environs of Palmyra, or Palmyra, depending on your preference for the semantical pronunciation. Alright, now the Genie of the village of Beth Faziel, the good and rewarding gods, probably related to these, and are other jinn who feature in accounts of Western Central Arabia. Now this is taken from Robert G. Hoyland's book, Arabia and the Arabs. The Quran, which took the creation myth concept partly from Christianity, which was several centuries older already, and partly from local pagan communities, which were even more ancient. In the creation story, we find that God makes man out of clay. We also see a curious passage that states that the jinn were also formed partly out of a scorchless, smokeless fire. Now, this is key. Now, not all jinn are the same. This is something we have to make clear. And they are not all created equal, like humans. Same thing. Humans were not created equal. They also had a society just like we had. They had courts, they had relationships, marriages. They were even fooling around with humans, reputedly. And jinn could also have different power levels, just like they could have different alignments on the good to evil scale too. So it's a mix. The most potent jinn are the ones that the genie stories we know of so well are based on. The ones that could do things for you upon command. These were initially thought, oddly enough, to be mostly evil, and also were regarded as the most powerful of all the jinn. The whole magic lamp idea that got carried into Western stories and then applied to all jinn comes due to a mistranslation of a telling of the story of Aladdin or Aladdin. If you actually read the story in the original form, a sorcerer sends Aladdin into a cave and gives him a ring for protection, as he is supposed to find this unique lamp. But it is already known that it's a dangerous thing to do, so he has been given this ring to protect himself from attack. And while he's in this cave, he begins to feel fear and starts to worry a little. So in order to soothe his tensions, he starts rubbing his hands together, and by doing so rubs the magic ring, and poof, a jinn appears. And because of this magical ring, he can command and control the jinn essentially. So what he's actually done is an evocation. Now we hear a similar story when we read about King Solomon. Solomon was reputedly able to command the jinn, what we refer to as Goetia or Goetic spirits, with a specially crafted magical ring, among other protections. Does this sound familiar to you? It should. There's another creature that comes to mind from this jinn belief that found its way to the West, and it's once again due to a simple mistranslation on the road, so to speak. It's a type of jinn called a ghoul, and you might recognize that it is similar to what we know so well as a ghoul. Okay, so ghoul, G-H-U-L, and ghoul, G-H-O-U-L. So this evil jinn forms the basis of our monster that is so familiar to us from horror films or spooky stories, or if you're a comic book fan, from the old DC comic book Tales of the Script stories, where a ghoul was always inexplicably showing up to eat things. Ghouls that devour people. Okay, so this is where it comes from. And speaking about horror movies, by the way, let's talk about possession. Now, jinn are thought to be able to possess any human being. Man, woman, children, all of them. But in this case, the possessor's age and what type of demon, what type of jinn, evil or good, is in dispute. Now, these jinn can only be driven out using an exorcism ritual called rudka, which uses the recitation of passages found in the Quran, similar to how Christian exorcisms are performed using the Bible. In the modern world, the belief in the jinn persists. This belief is not buried in the ancient world merely as part of folklore, but continues to this day through ardent believers. And there are several current universities that study and also certain academics at these universities who are attempting to apply modern science to prove the existence of jinn. Now, they do this through various applications of contemporary science, interestingly enough. So there we have it, all about the jinn, or the genie, so to speak. And these are the counterparts to the goetic spirits that we have in the Western, the Greek and Egyptian system. So it could really be a very similar thing. Now, are the hierarchies the same? The hierarchies different? Well, there are some differences, but there are also a lot of parallels. It's also interesting that if we really examine literature, even Islamic literature, the genie are lower in the hierarchy than angels, and much lower than archangels. So that is interesting to note. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there for today. Please research further if you are interested in genie or jinn or goetic spirits. And I will continue the series off. I won't announce what the topic is, but stay tuned, because next week is going to be another very interesting theme related to magic and spirits and everything else that pertains to it. All right, enjoy the weekend and have a great week next week, and I'll see you then. And by the way, if you liked this YouTube presentation, feel free, and I'd be happy if you press the like. And also, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe, and also click the bell icon there so you can be one of the first to be updated when I upload another interesting episode. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. All right, so on that note, have a great weekend once again, and I'll see you next week. Cheers.